We're good to go. Okay, I'd like to call to order the May 22nd meeting of the Planning Commission. Charlie, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Barranco?
Here.
Commissioner Cardoza?
Here.
Commissioner Flores?
Here.
Commissioner Hoff?
Oh, we'll share.
Sorry about that.
Here.
Commissioner Jeffrey?
Here.
Vice Chair Donaldson?
Here.
Chair Martin has an excused absence this evening, so we have a quorum of 6 commissioners, and Vice Chair Donaldson is in charge.
Okay, we'll rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody. The first item on the agenda is public comment on items that are not on our current agenda. If there's anyone wishing to speak, you could come forward now. Well, seeing no one, we can move on to the next item, which is the action recap, the minutes from the last meeting. And Chair Martin, who was not present, did send a correction to the minutes.
I can read that if you like. And you should all have in front of you a printout of Chair Martin's comments. I believe what you have is an email from Miru Desai, which is Chair Martin's comments. And this is for all of the items on the agenda, so you can refer to that throughout the meeting. We'll be referencing them. Under the action recap, he says that at the end of page 2, under his comments on the Marketplace project, he expressed a number of additional concerns that weren't captured in the minutes. He would like the following sentences added to the minutes. Quote, he strongly objected to the alternative massing and tower in phase 2 and the alternative concept presented by the applicant during their presentation. He submitted a number of suggested edits to staff on the draft conditions of approval and findings of fact, unquote.
I have another addition correction. This is on page 3 of the minutes. Commissioner Jeffrey, and I want to change it to read, believes the 64th and Christie site is appropriate for housing and does not, and she does not support changing the use to the commercial use at the site. And then, period. And then she wanted to know if the change in land use at the 64th and Christie site would require changing the table. And that's the table that's referenced in the staff report.
Are there any other corrections or additions to the minutes?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part.
Oh.
Commissioner Jeffrey believes that 64th and Christie.
The 64th and Christie site is appropriate for housing and does not support changing the use to commercial at the site, period. Then she wanted to know if the change in land use at the 64th and Christie site will require changing the table.
Okay.
And that's what was referenced in our staff report. I don't remember what the number was.
Okay.
Okay, with those corrections, do we have
Move
a
with
motion?
changes. So moved.
I second.
Without objection, we approve the minutes. Moving on to the director's report.
Okay, let's see. First, concerning recent city council meetings, they met on May 6th, then on May 20th. On May 6th, the redevelopment agency approved the issuance of a request for proposals for rehabilitation of the fourplex located at 40th and Adeline Streets that was relocated there from 41st Street as part of the Oak Walk project. And citizen Stephen Keller made a presentation to the city council about a paper that he has written on the future growth and development of Emeryville called Let Knowledge Serve the City. On May 20th, the council held a study session on the parking study for the North Hollis area, and they directed that a parking implementation plan now be prepared. The agency selected HQE as the firm to prepare a study for the proposed pedestrian and bicycle bridge over the freeway at 65th Street. They also directed that the study area be expanded to the south to encompass a potential freeway crossing closer to the peninsula. The agency discussed the rehabilitation efforts of the 5 houses along 41st Street at the Oak Walk project and they were assured that every effort is being made to comply with the conditions of approval. The council approved a noise waiver for Head Over Heels to do seismic retrofit work on 7 Saturdays between June 20th and August 3rd. The council also approved the draft housing element with some minor revisions, and that will now be forwarded to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for their review. And finally, the City Council approved the proposed amendments to the Affordable Housing Set-Aside Ordinance that were reviewed by the Commission at your last meeting. In a couple of other items, I just wanted to let you know that the environmental impact report for the 39th and Adeline project has been published. Looks like this. You should know. Yes, Commissioner Flores has to recuse on this, so he's not listening. But the rest of you should have it there on the dais, right? It's been delivered to you on the dais. Chair Martin's copy has been mailed to him. The public review period for this draft EIR will end on July 7th. The Oakland Planning Commission will hold a meeting to solicit comments at their June 18th meeting, and that will be at 6 p.m. in Hearing Room 1 of Oakland City Hall. And you will be holding a meeting to solicit comments, a hearing to solicit comments at your next meeting on June 26th. Finally, I just wanted to report briefly that myself, Senior Planner Miru Desai, and Commissioner Donaldson attended the National American Planning Association Conference in Las Vegas that was held from April 27th through May 1st. I won't go into a lot of detail about that at this point, but if you take a look at our April progress report, which you should all have a copy of, there is a fairly lengthy write-up about the conference in the report, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about that write-up. I did want to let you know that at the conference, the APA Planners Bookstore always has a booth set up where they have great deals. They sell most of their catalog at conference discount prices. So if you ever make it to an APA conference, you can get good deals on planning books. And you can get good deals on training CDs. These are some of the CDs that you had previously identified through the catalog of training materials that the APA offers. So I managed to pick up 4 of these at cut rate prices. They are Complete Streets, Lead for Neighborhoods, Design Standards that Shape Urban Form, and Balancing the Land Use Transportation Equation. Each of these is an hour and a half. It consists of a PowerPoint presentation and a panel discussion, as well as call-in questions and answers. These are recordings of previously held web seminar broadcasts, similar to the one that you all participated in about a year ago. So if you're interested in viewing these CDs, or viewing these presentations, I mean, you don't have to answer this right now, but you might think about this, and we can discuss it later. I had several ideas for how we could do this. One is that at a future commission meeting where we have a light agenda, we could just schedule it as part of a regular meeting. They are an hour and a half. Second possibility is we could schedule special commission meetings that could be in the afternoon or evening, where we could devote the entire meeting to viewing one of these presentations. Third possibility is if 3 or fewer commissioners wanted to attend, so we wouldn't have a quorum, you could attend one of our staff meetings where we might be viewing these. In fact, the Complete Streets one we did look at our Development Coordinating Committee last week, and I think the staff got a lot out of that.
How long was that one?
They're all an hour and a half.
They're all an hour.
And fourth possibility is you could individually borrow these and view them at home if you want to, as long as you promise to bring them back. Any other ideas you may have for how you might want to look at these?
Thanks.
So like I say, you don't have to answer right now unless you have some ideas, but you can think about it and let me know.
Well, we have a relatively short agenda. Maybe we should hear 2 or 3 of them this evening?
That's a good idea. Unfortunately, they're not listed on the agenda tonight.
I don't think that will pass.
So that concludes my director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Charlie. Maybe if people have ideas about how they want to view or participate with these seminars, we could. Do you have an idea?
Any response at all on the RFPs for the fourplex? Any? 1, 2?
Oh, I don't know. I'm
Okay.
not sure when the deadline is.
No, nobody stepping forward early.
I don't
Okay.
know. I can get back to you on that.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I had a quick question about the, one of your bullet items here summarizing the
No.
report. And the East Coast folks learning to pronounce Nevada. What is the proper pronunciation?
Nevada.
Nevada.
Nevada. Right. Not Nevada.
Okay. Any other questions for Charlie? Thanks, Charlie. So we move on to the public hearings. We have 2 public hearings. The study session that's on the agenda has been postponed or canceled, so we only have 2 items this evening. On the first one, I have to recuse myself for a possible conflict of interest, so I have to get another chair.
So with that, I will chair the meeting for about a minute. And I would like to, at this point, the rules of the commission say that if both the chair and the vice chair are unavailable, that the commission will elect a chair pro tem from the remaining members. So at this point, I'd like to call for nominations for a chair pro tem.
I would like to nominate Patty.
I'll second.
Any other nominations? Any objection to Commissioner Jeffrey being the chair pro tem? Congratulations, Commissioner Jeffrey. You might want to grab the gavel and start running the meeting.
Wield the gavel, Patty.
Okay. Well, as Commissioner Donaldson mentioned, the first public hearing on our agenda this evening is the Marketplace Redevelopment Project. Maru, do you have a brief presentation on that report?
Brief. It's about 3 years old.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm sorry, we're having some technical difficulties, so we'll go back to the old technology that we used to use. As the Commission knows, the Commission considered the Marketplace project last month and continued it to basically resolve 2 issues. One was that the Commission wanted to ensure that the conditions reflected that there was a mix of uses, mix of residential and non-residential uses in each phase of the project. And the second was that the phasing of when the park would be built. They wanted to see if the park could be built in phase 1. So we've drafted some language for both the conditions, and I'll quickly go through that. So this is the one regarding the mix of uses. One option is essentially saying it allows flexibility for the applicant to build any use in phase 1, which means that the entire phase 1 could be non-residential. However, it makes the applicant devote at least 50% residential in phase 2. The second option,
In phase 2?
in phase 2. So if there is no residential in phase 1, then in phase 2, there will be at least 50% of the total square footage that would be built in phase 2 would be residential.
Well, my understanding was that the Shell Mine site would be developed in phase 1, and that with the changes that have been discussed, that there would be some limited residential at the Shell Mine site.
The limited residential is 10 townhomes. If you recall, on the podium, on the
Right.
parking podium, there were those 10 townhomes. So that would be the only residential, possibly the only residential in in the Shellman building and in phase 1.
So there would be a minimum of 10
Right.
condominium
Well-
units.
This condition as written is saying that phase 1 could be entirely non-residential. There could be no residential in phase 1, the way this condition is written. And if that were the case, then at the end of phase 2, 50% of the total project, including phase 1 and phase 2,
But
would
that
have to
isn't
be
what I thought she
residential.
said. She said 50% of phase 2. Did you mean 50% of 1 and 2 would be would be residential?
It would be 50% of phase 2.
Not 50% of the whole
right,
project?
Well, I want some clarification then. So the Shell Mound building would not be constructed in phase 1? I thought that was going to be
No, Shellman
constructed.
building would be constructed in phase 1.
Okay, so then there would be a component of residential in the Shell Mound
There
building.
might not
There
be the
might-
way this condition is
This,
written.
this allows flexibility that there might not be.
It could be none.
Oh, that's not,
Let's go on to,
yeah,
See,
let's have the
we have
applicant,
two
yeah.
options of language, and they're kind of at, like, opposite ends of the extremes, and you can figure out something in the middle if you want.
Okay,
Okay, so this is option 2. This requires the applicant to build the 64th Christie building as residential, and that would be in phase 1. And it also requires, that in phase 2, at least 50% of both phase 1 and phase 2 be residential. This is, I know it's a little bit hard to read, but I was trying to get everything in one page. This is regarding the park. There's additional language. First of all, it makes the park be constructed in phase 1, and there is there's additional language that says that the park, the FTP that will include the shell mount building will also include the design of the park. And these are the various things that they would need to apply as part of their FTP application. I have added a suggestion made by Jim Martin regarding additional language regarding that there be design plans and landscaping and hardscape, and that's one. Let me see if I can zoom in here. So essentially, the language says design plans for new park, including reconsolidation of existing and expanded park land, hardscape and planting areas, landscape plants, and planting palette. So this would be submitted as part of the FTP.
So A is changing, the ones we have listed on our copy move down, and this one is the new A.
We don't.
Right,
have-
this-
We don't have this.
Yeah, you just don't have A in your staff report.
So
The rest is the same.
Okay.
So, and as part of this change in condition, other conditions like 3B3, which are basically other conditions which refer to the park in phase 2, as it did originally last month, would be eliminated, and this would be park in phase 1. Then there are some other changes which the commission agreed to. Applicant had requested that the first FTP be submitted within 3 years. We had recommended 2, and the commission was amenable to that change, so that has been included. Then there was some additional language that needed to be added by one of the commissioner's recommendation regarding the central median, and that has been added. And the same change would also apply to the resolutions where, when they talk about the same condition. This is another change that was not in your staff report. It is Chair Martin's recommendation that this additional language be added, it's in blue basically, to the project description in one of the resolution, and sort of a clarification of the existing Amtrak connection, and that the stair system be redesigned and replaced. As Charlie indicated, you have Jim Martin's various comments on this. I'm going to quickly go through them. Some of them are minor edits, and I will point to the ones which require some discussion on the part of the commission. So quite quickly, the first one is essentially about missing page. It was a typo in numbering. Comment 2 was a minor edit which has been incorporated. Comment 3, and you can, if you can't read it on the screen, you do have the email, and the language is exactly the same. And here, Commissioner Martin disagrees with option 2, that is making 64th, requiring the applicant to make 64th and Christie building residential. And essentially, this is what this comment number 3 says. So that would be a point of discussion for the commission to consider. Comment number 4 is regarding additional language to the park condition that, as I indicated, I've added. Comment 5 is again a minor edit which has been incorporated. Comment 6 is regarding adjustments in numbering. And there was a little bit of a confusion because the numbering in the original conditions of approval needed to be changed because they did not follow one and the other. So when I rectified that, they did not quite match. But basically it's the same thing. So with a slight difference, but it's basically because of the way the numbering had to be adjusted in the first time around. Comment 7 is again an edit which has been incorporated. Comment 8 is regarding the language for inclusion of the central median and the 20-foot widening, which was in the condition, and he mentions that it needs to be in the exhibits as well. The staff report does mention them, and they were incorporated by reference, so I'm just adding here for clarification that they would, the exhibit A and B of the resolution would be changed as well. Comment 9 is again minor language, which I mentioned earlier in my presentation, so that has been added. And comment 10 is a point for discussion. Commissioner Martin would like additional language, and he's open to how the language is framed, that the residential units, whenever they are built, at least 50% of them have a condo map, be plotted as condominiums. I want to make it clear that just because a certain number of units are plotted as condominium units does not guarantee that they will be owner occupied. As we very well know, 1401 Park, the Doyle Street condos have been plotted. They were conceived as condos, but they are being used as rental units today. And we cannot legally require them to be owner occupied, regardless of whether there's a map on it or not. So I just wanted to make sure that the commission understood that. So essentially, the key points of Commissioner Martin's comments that needs to be discussed by the commission is that he disagrees with the option 2 that requires 64th and Christie building to be residential. He also mentions that he disagrees with the idea of the greenway along Christie Avenue, a proposal that was suggested by John Truman, and he would like to have added language which requires certain percentage of residential development to be plotted as condos. I would like to also point your attention to other pieces of paper on the dais. You will have the applicant's letter. These include both the one that was submitted today as well as the one that was submitted yesterday. There's also a letter from Colliers International, a real estate commercial broker. And there's a letter from Greenbelt Alliance expressing support for the project. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Maru?
I do.
Okay, Art?
You said that under option 1, that they would not have to build any residential in phase 1.
Yes, they have the option not to build.
Not to build. And in phase 2, they would have to build 50% of phase 2 or 50% of 1 and 2. I wasn't clear on that.
The way it's written, it'll be 50% of phase 2.
Phase 2. How long a period of time, has a period of time been specified of how long it is before phase 2 has to be activated?
It is, I believe, about
10 years.
15 years
They have 15 years to implement phase 2?
before the permits expire. They have 15 years to submit their first FTP for phase 2.
So the question I have is that, isn't it true that if they build only non-residential in phase 1, they not only have 15 years before they have to build any residential, they actually don't have to do it at all. There's no obligation for them to complete the project.
That is correct.
So we could end up with a non-residential project.
That is a possibility. The permits, the entitlements of phase 2 and subsequent phases would expire if they don't do it within 15 years. But there is
they're
nothing
not-
here,
they're
nothing in
not
the
ob-
conditions. Yeah.
They're not obligated to do it.
No.
And then, as far as the park goes, whose obligation is it to actually build the park?
The way the condition is written, the applicant will build the park. The way I have the condition is written. The only thing that is not in the condition is who's going to actually pay for the park
Well,
and how that is going
I'm
to
sorry,
work out.
that's
And
the-
that will be worked out in the OPA negotiations.
Oh, I see. That's still open to negotiation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does the applicant wish to make a presentation? And respond to some questions that we might have?
Would be glad to respond to questions. Just briefly, we have been trying to clarify language that we drafted several weeks ago in response to questions. So by way of overview, I'd like to first of all start with an announcement. We just this afternoon at about 4 o'clock got word from the U.S. Green Building Council that the Marketplace redevelopment project has been awarded a platinum level certification. It's the first platinum level project to be designated by the U.S. Green Building Council in their new neighborhood development pilot program, and we're very excited that we get to make this public announcement to you guys. So, then on just sort of keeping track of all these comments, we largely agree with the comments laid out in Commissioner Martin's letter, and we attempted to incorporate the bulk of those in this letter, which we sent to you this afternoon. Obviously, questions of the commission are pointing out that there are still a few clarifications that we need to make. Commissioner Hoff's question about whether this condition language regarding housing or office in phases one.
This one here
thank you.
is probably best.
The question about how much housing would be achieved by phase 2, and are we saying 50% of phase 2 or 50% of phases 1 and 2? The intent was to be 50% of phases 1 and 2. This language is unclear, I believe, on that point. I go back to Maru's original staff report that laid out our recommended language. So I suggest, to clarify that point, that it be revised to say, provided you consider this language as opposed to the other alternatives which are in front of you, then phases 1, 2, and 1, or 1 and 2, shall include at least 50% gross residential square footage, because that was the intent. And frankly, the way that the FAR calculation is done in the general plan amendment recommendation and the way that all the traffic reports have been run, we really can't add very much more office than one office building in the whole 20-year build-out of this development without hitting traffic problems. So we're talking about whether there's one office building in this 20-year project or 2 office buildings in the 20-year project. So making it really clear that by the end of phase 2, half the square footage has to be housing, I think is an important thing to do so that everyone's clear at the get-go what the intent is. Secondly, again, it was our intent to incorporate the townhomes that are shown on the Shell Mound property as a part of the residential, and the initial language we submitted was not clear on that point. So we have recommended in our second letter that we add a sentence. It can include Chair Martin's language regarding balancing housing overall, and then additional language to state that if the Shell Mound building is developed primarily for office, that FDP will include townhomes above the retail in the general location depicted on the plans. And then a more generalized statement about office developments in this project, because I've heard that there are some concerns about whether or not the level of quality of the office would achieve the sort of design goals of the commission. So we're suggesting some additional language to be crystal clear on that point, which is that office buildings should be first developed primarily as build-to-suits to ensure a high level of quality, and 2, shall be of a high quality design and materials eligible for green building certification under the U.S. Green Building Council LEED program. Under our neighborhood development certification, 40% of the buildings themselves have to be LEED certified, and the office buildings and the for sale residential are the most likely green certified building candidates. Then on the conditions regarding the park, again, just to move quickly through this, I don't want to read the whole letter, but Commissioner Martin's suggestions were very helpful, and we would appreciate if the commission would include those. Regarding the park, we would like the commission to be clear that it's the intent of the city that the park should be built in the first phase, provided the funding is available, but that you not refuse to issue a condition or a certificate of occupancy for the Shellmound building if the park is not done because we couldn't find the money. So to reflect that concept, we've suggested revising the language condition regarding the park to say the applicant should construct the park in conjunction with the Shellmound building, but that the timing for the construction of the park will be established in accordance with the schedule and the terms in the OPA. So it leaves some flexibility, it makes your intent very clear. The city's intent is to get that park as soon as possible, but it doesn't put me out of compliance with my development plan if the OPA negotiations have been unsuccessful in securing funding for the park. And that in any event, the park will be completed prior to the occupancy of any of the buildings in phase 2. So there's no question about whether the park happens at the very tail end of phase 2, which could be a ways down the road. And then finally, there's been some recent dialogue from some folks in the community about wanting to hold open the possibility of looking at alternative bike access to the Amtrak crossing, and we didn't want to preclude that in the development plan. So we recommend that you consider language saying that the final development plan for the Shellmound building will include a study of the potential future bike connection that would connect East and West Emeryville more directly across the railroad tracks, and the impact of any of that on the building and site design. So with those additional suggested changes, we are here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of the applicant?
So Denise, as they're written here in the letter that we received today, this is how you would like to see the conditions?
Yeah, with the one
spelled
addition that Commissioner Hoff pointed out, that the housing's supposed to be 50% of phase 1 and phase 2.
50% of phase 1 and phase 2. We have that exact language then?
It's
Charlie.
simply an addition, as Ms. Pinkston pointed out. If you look at the staff report in this packet, on the first page, that says condition of approval number Roman numeral 3A1D, that underlined sentence, the last sentence in that paragraph, if phase 1 does not include any residential development, then phase 2, that should say phase 1 and 2, shall include at least 50% residential gross square footage, not including retail areas. Or actually, to reword that to make it a little more clear, it should say at least 50% of the total square footage of phases 1 and 2 shall be residential. I think, actually, if you look on the second page of the staff report, the one that is erroneously labeled as page 3 of 4, under the second full paragraph where it says condition 3B1D, this is the other option, but the language is what we're looking for here. If you look at the underlined language there, it says, provided that the end of phase 2, at least 50% of the square footage of the development, not including parking, in phase 1 and phase 2 is residential.
Okay.
That's
the language.
I think that's what Ms. Pinkston is saying also.
Okay. And the, on the issue of the park, would you be amenable to starting or instigating the design process?
Yeah, absolutely. We
Yeah,
support
and
that
getting into
language from the
that,
Commissioner.
yeah, because that can be lengthy, and it would be nice to start getting excited about it if everything goes well tonight.
Well, and that's part of the cost issue, too. You don't really know what it's going to cost till you have it designed. So it'd
Sure.
be great to get that started so we know what we're looking at. And
Absolutely. That's all
Any
my
other
questions.
questions? Thank you, Denise.
Chair
Okay.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
I would suggest at this point that you reopen the public hearing in case any members, you were going to do
Yeah,
that.
that's
Okay.
what I was going to do. Okay, thank you, Charlie. With that, I will reopen the public hearing for anyone that wishes to comment on this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Commissioners?
I would recommend approval with the changes.
I have a couple points I want to make, but I want to find out if anyone else has anything first.
I have some comments to make. I realize that the market conditions right now are not conducive for residential development, but I've been in the real estate development business for 30 years, and I know that in a 15-year cycle, there's going to be many ups and downs, and while condominium development may not be possible this year, it may be possible within a year or two, and phase one is supposed to be 15 years in length before it's built out. I thought our entire concept of marketplace was to have an urban setting where for 24/7 we would have activity by residential as well as commercial uses in the marketplace area. And I think their proposal goes against that. I feel strongly that we should require, I don't care whether 64th Street and Christie is residential or commercial. I think they could have their choice as to where the residential goes. But I feel strongly that 50% of phase one should be residential, and I really believe that the park ought to be finished in phase one. That would be my view.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoff. Other commissioners?
I've only been in development for 10 years. Sorry. Art.
You have 1/3 in the
Okay, good. And, you know, developers and cities will build what the market bears. I don't think this is going to end in a year. I think it's an opportunity right now to build commercial at that site. I think the developer is coming forth in good faith to try and build something that is, you know, smart, good, mixed use. And even though the commercial is coming at the front end, we're still guaranteed to have the residential. 15 years is a long time, but I know the market will change well before that, and I think there'll be it'll change, and the developer will want to build the residential. I feel pretty confident in that, and I'll make sure of it, Art. And the park, I would like to see the park built out also in the first phase. But since the funding isn't settled, it seems that if they go through the process of the design charrettes and bringing it to commission and taking it out to the community, that's a good faith effort, and that the funding will come along, and we can keep pushing them every time they come in for an entitlement on a specific building. So I support the changes and what the developer wants to do tonight.
Thank you. Commissioner Cardoza? Angela?
Well, the only thing that I would like to see added is a little more language about what the pedestrian, not pedestrian, but the crossing at Amtrak would be, and have that brought in maybe during phase two and not later, because I think it's part of what makes the mixed use and the walkable city happen. And it doesn't say anything other than we'll study it and consider it, and I'd like to see something a little more defined about whether that would happen in phase one when they'd start that, or phase two, and something just a little more than the fact that it will or may be considered at some point.
Not just the staircase. The staircase is
Well, the staircase would be there, but alternatives, so like, you know, more handicap access, bike accessibility, where it would be located, how it would be designed, and when. The when would be the big thing.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification?
Mhm.
Are you referring to the item on page 3 of Ms. Pinkston's letter of today that talks about including a study of potential future bicycle connections across the railroad tracks? Is that what you're saying you want more, better defined?
Yes, and I have so many documents up here, I haven't lost that, but yes.
Just as sort of a point of clarification there, since the phase one project includes the Shell Mound site, which it would be fronting this area, presumably that's when the study would occur, because as part of that, one of the things that I was very concerned about with that is I think it's something that should be considered. However, if there's not adequate width. I don't want a bike lane to destroy the pedestrian amenities and street activation that we want on that street. So the studies would be done during phase one. So I think maybe we could clarify that a little bit more, say it would be done during the phase one of the project. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Buzz?
I agree with Jim Martin's comment that it would be nice to have owner-occupied units because that clearly strengthens the nature of the community. Unfortunately, there's no way that you can place a control on a condominium that says it can only be occupied by the owner. If there were co-ops, it's possible to do that, but co-ops aren't financeable, so therefore that's really not a possibility. I agree with Commissioner Martin that we should not require residential in the first phase. And
Did Martin say that?
excuse
Yes.
me?
Is that Martin's
Yes,
point?
he did. And that we shouldn't be too tough on the park since there's probably not going to be any residential development in the first phase. Therefore, there's not going to be any demand for additional park. But that's a matter of what funding is available and whether the city is willing to contribute to it. As far as the rest of it goes, I think it's a step in the right direction. Having been a developer myself for 40 years, I know that these markets
Me
do
plus
go up and down,
It's me plus you.
Yeah, man.
and it's not going to be
How
a
many years did he
year
say?
before the
40.
residential market
he
comes
trumped
back.
us.
Usually,
Shows how
since we
old he
had
is.
an enormously long boom the last time, I think it's going to be a very long down, and it will be a minimum of 5 years, if not longer, before the
Right.
residential market returns. Other than that, 15 years is a long time, but if the market gets better, there's a lot of incentive for them to move faster on it. And they're not going to wait 15 years if they can make money in 5 years.
May I ask the developer a question?
Sure.
Denise, I had a question I forgot to ask you. If you build residential, if you build all commercial in phase one, that would be the Shellmound building would be residential, and the Christie building would be residential. Those are the two buildings in phase one.
I mean, if phase one was all residential,
I
yes.
mean, all commercial.
If it was all commercial, those are the two buildings in
No.
phase one, and what our modified language said, though, is that we would
Okay.
keep the townhomes at the Shellmount site.
And I assume that the building in phase two that's between Shellmound and the railroad tracks doesn't seem to me that it's suitable for residential construction. It's, the site is long and narrow. Where would you put 600 units of residential
Hang on, I'll give you the map.
in the project? Because Martin, for one, said that he didn't want a large tower at that end. You remember, that was one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
problems. That other alternative of a large tower at the north end was not acceptable.
This is a little hard to see, but it illustrates the point here. This might be easier. Phase two has two components.
Can you use the microphone, please?
I'm sorry. Phase two has two components. One is a building at the site of the current Regal Theater, or UA Theater. That building is shown here as housing and retail. This building right here is a housing and retail building. There is no office shown in that building at all.
And it says that it'll contain like 180 units.
This is a 150-foot tower. I can't remember the unit count, and I can't read the map. And then this is an office building shown in this phase two location. And in this version of it, we're showing, this was an entirely commercial building, and this was an entirely residential building. We did a study for your meeting last time that showed how this site could include townhomes over the garage,
This one here,
the long, narrow site along the railroad tracks.
that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, that it could include townhomes over the garage in the location that's now labeled as Commercial E. It's kind of hard to read, sorry about that.
But do you think between that site and the theater, which I understand has an option to stay put for 15 years according to their lease, so that may or may not be available. And then you were going to put another building just south of that, which I think would only contain another 85 units. That's a far cry from 600 units that you're obligated to build.
The way the condition language is worded, we would build half of the gross square footage as housing by the end of phase 2. So what we're really talking about then, in this version of the site plan, this is an office building, this is a residential building, this is a residential building. They're all roughly in the 150,000-ish square foot range. What we're talking about doing with this, allowing us to mix land uses, is swapping out that office building for one of these residential towers and some of the potential commercial residential in this for another commercial building.
I think you just changed something. You just said half, 50% of the residential. I thought it was 50% of the project. I thought we would still end up with 600 units of residential, which represented half of the original project.
Sure. What you can't have is more.
Could you explain to me where 600 units could go on this site?
May I help out here a little bit? The 674 units
Right.
that are mentioned, that's the project that the EIR analyzes, and that's the project that's described in the staff report. What the applicant is proposing is, and this is not a new proposal, is that the land use of some of these buildings might change from residential to commercial. And in order to do that, additional traffic studies would need to be done. But at the end of the day, when the project is finished, completely finished, there will not be 674 units anymore. There will be a lesser number of residential units.
If you take their original map, which I did, and add up the number of units that they show on the buildings on their proposed plan, it comes out to 613 units.
Right, so there would be fewer units and more office.
Wait. You're saying the plan that as requested, the PDP?
The plan as submitted,
Has
if you add up the
613?
units that they show on the plan for each building, it comes up to 613 units, and she agrees with me.
Well, it should be 674, so I'm not.
It should be, there must be an error in addition somewhere.
Yeah,
The number of units in each of the various buildings is spelled out in our, I think it's in our staff report from last time.
And that adds up to and I did that, it adds up to 613,
Really?
yeah.
Well, I would suggest
Setting aside the
that,
math issue, the math should be correct on the plans and in the staff report, and we can track where that error occurred, but it should be that the total potential number of units is 674. Obviously, if
But my question is, when you're saying,
I could just finish the answer, and that might
yeah,
clarify
okay,
the
go
question.
ahead.
If this building becomes office and this building becomes office, then this building will not be office, and the rest of it will be housing in these other phases. As you point out, there won't be as many units by the end of the fourth phase if 2 of the buildings are office instead of 1.
How many units would that be?
Well, I don't know, but the condition pledge, because it's not designed yet, the condition pledge is that 50% of the gross square footage by the end of phase 2 will be housing.
so half of the square footage of the project would be
But
housing,
don't you
and
think
half
we
would be
are entitled
commercial.
to be sure that you can do that rather than, because from my observation, it's not possible.
We did a study, which we provided to staff when we did our draft condition language, that showed where and how office would fit and residential units would fit, and showed that we could achieve the 50% gross floor area as residential.
So you're telling me at the end of phase 3,
End of phase 2.
to whichever way we go, we'll still have the same number of residential units as you originally proposed?
No, what I'm saying is you'll have the same amount of gross square footage.
Well,
So the pie will be the same size. The gross square footage pie won't change, but instead of the pie being 3/4 housing and 1/4 office, it'll be half housing, half
250.
office. But, so the gross square footage doesn't change. It's the allocation of land uses.
So we're going to
within
end
the
up with
square-
much less residential units.
You'll end up with one fewer, well, you'll end up with one more office building in effect. So
So-
if each of these buildings is roughly 180, 150 units, you'll end up with roughly 150 units less overall by the end of phase
150 units less?
Yeah.
I figured 300, but I'll defer to your math.
Denise, I have a question too, because I thought one of the questions that Art was asking was, would the building that would then be used for residential be able to conform to the size requirements that we had looked at for the different layouts? Because one of the concerns we had was not having a high-rise. And would the design be able to accommodate enough residential areas without going into a high-rise?
Absolutely. The way that we drafted the language and talked about it was, and have talked about it really since we submitted the application, within each building envelope, and the envelopes are specified on this plan as height and, massing, that the land uses can change, but the building envelope cannot. So with that precept still in operation here, we're just saying, we're being more specific about what that means. And what we're proposing is that this business of half the gross square footage has to be housing. But you're absolutely right that the building envelopes can't get taller or materially wider than they are shown here. That they were designed to create view corridors and so forth, and you can't modify those without being out of compliance with the development plan.
Then one of the other questions that comes up with having fewer residential units or fewer space for residential units is that the size of the units, if we need to increase the number of units, then becomes smaller. And one of the concerns that we have is that there are enough units that will support families, 3-bedroom units and larger spaced units. And it seems like that would also kind of be at risk of not
Some of these
happening.
buildings lend themselves more to family units than others. The high-rise towers don't make great family unit living. It's much more expensive to build them. There are locations on the site, on this property and on this property, where the building heights are lower, so the construction cost is a lower price point. It's less expensive to build a larger unit. And these were conceived of potentially as townhomes, which are an ideal family unit size if you can hit the right price point. So since what we're talking about changing is, moving this office building to one of these buildings and shifting some of this unit massing, it might come out of the tower, it might come out of here. Certainly you could clarify in the condition about housing, in addition to saying that half has to be mapped for condos, that you want to be sure that there remains a mix of unit sizes, so that a range of family types can be accommodated in the future housing phases, and it doesn't all become, 500 square foot studios.
Any other questions?
According to your figures, the Shell Mound building and the Christie building, if it were in residential, would contain 391 units. These are the figures off your map. If that was all commercial and you were only building the theater and the little building next to it, that would only constitute 285 units.
Right, but this entire building would be a housing
So we are
building.
getting a really reduced number of residential units in the project.
This building here, which is an office
be
and commercial
residential.
building in this version of the plan, would be all housing.
How many units would it hold?
Well, I don't know, I haven't designed it yet, but
And
It doesn't
again,
look- It doesn't look like it could be for townhouses, but it wouldn't be for a large apartment complex.
Well,
the
there's
way-
a-
the way the site is.
there's
I don't think we need more large apartment complexes here. I think it's nice to have housing integrated into it, but having a huge volume of housing here, I don't think
Rest
is
my
important.
case.
it appears, Art, that with a mix of 50% commercial and 50% housing, that it's likely that the number of units, while there would be the balance of 50-50 between residential and commercial, the number of units would be somewhat reduced, maybe by 100 plus or minus units, in comparison with the site map that you're looking at now. And it's a question, I guess, is that acceptable to you or not? Can you live with that or not?
Yeah, the central issue is Phase 1. I don't feel that we should have an all-commercial phase one. That's
Okay.
more important issue.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to share my comments with the commission and the public. Commissioner Martin and I met with the applicant, it's probably been a couple of weeks ago, to discuss some of our concerns based upon our last Planning Commission meeting. And as a result of that meeting, it resulted in Jim's comments, which have been shared, provided to all of you and discussed this evening. And my impressions and comments have somewhat changed from our previous Planning Commission meeting. And I feel now that for the 64th and Christie Street site, if we do get a quality kind of commercial building and recognizing the condition the market is in, I could also support commercial at that location. However, I really do want to make it clear, and I think we've got there over the last 10 minutes or so, that in phase one for the Shell Mound project, that we do maintain that minimum of the 12 townhome type units that are shown in the design concepts that have been presented to us on numerous occasions. That's really critical, and not having been a developer for any years, I have a question for Denise, in that in terms of the phasing of phase one, would you envision looking at the 64th and Christie Street site first and develop that as the office project, and then depending upon the conditions of the market for the Shell Mound project, maybe it would be beneficial at that point in time to even do more than the 10 townhomes if the market would allow it?
I think that we've talked about this at previous meetings, that this whole site is somewhat constrained by the existing agreements with my existing tenants. Mm-hmm. The 64th and Christie site is the least constrained because it was never a part of the marketplace proper. So it is the most likely to be developed first as something because it is the least constrained. And in order to build anything on marketplace, I have to get approvals from Borders, Regal Theaters, and Woodfin, all of which are in process, none of which are inked. So I don't know how much longer that will take, but the 64th and Christie site is relatively unencumbered by those. So that's just a practical matter. Certainly, we would be happy to look at ways of including more townhomes on the Shell Mound site, should that site be commercial. And once this issue was brought up, we started to do a couple of quick studies. If you guys want to encourage us in fact, I was specifically vague in my language regarding the townhomes, to leave open the possibility that we could have more townhome units in that location. Just trying to find it here.
Well, that's how I interpreted it when I read it.
Yeah, the idea being that if we could fit more, we would show you more. So I'm happy if you want to add a few phrases there that says that you encourage us to attempt to locate more townhomes in that general part of the site plan when we come back with a final development plan, just like we'll look additionally at the bike path issue when we come back with a final development plan.
Oh, that would be good. And that's not going to give us a larger number, but at least it's some residential in that phase one. And I think, just in terms of the concept that's been presented to us, the locating the townhomes as you enter Shell Mound, I think it's really important to have that mix of residential and commercial at that location. It's very important. And the other issue that I've discussed with the applicant is the possibility of leaving a placeholder for a bike lane between the Woodfin Hotel and the Shell Mound site, with the caveat that it would be considered, and that's why the language was presented as it was, to study it if there's adequate width to incorporate a bike path, but to not diminish the quality of the pedestrian environment and the retail use at the ground level, so that we can continue to make sure we have an active space along there. But I think the more access we can provide and the more connectivity we can provide It's consistent with what we envision in the general plan update, and we've heard this on a number of occasions from the public that they want to see more access and more connectivity. In terms of Commissioner Martin's other comments about the park, I too am concerned about sort of the not having a definite answer that we're going to get the park constructed by the completion of phase 1, but I understand the financial challenges of that. And if we're looking at a commercial building in the first part of the first phase, I'm less concerned about the demands for a park if the conditions change so that we can look at some more housing at the Showmont site, then we really need to think about getting that park in. And I support Frank's comment that we really need to get going on the design and the community outreach and such from the get-go so that we do have something in place when the park can be built. And then finally, the comment about 50% owner-occupied. I understand where Commissioner Martin is coming from, but however, since we do have legal considerations here, I would suggest that we not include that in the conditions of approval, but with the understanding that to the extent that the market conditions would allow it, that we really do try to support a minimum of 50% owner occupied. And I know we can't put that in the conditions at this point, but as the project moves forward and comes before the commission, I think we can monitor that. So that sort of concludes my comments. Yes, Charlie?
Staff would like clarification on 2 points.
Okay, only 2?
Well, I don't know. Perhaps the attorney or the Miru may have some more. First, we understand the intent and the spirit of what the applicant is proposing, and we have no doubt that this is all in good faith. However, there is the way the suggested language is written. We think there's a bit of a loophole here. If, for example, the project were sold to another developer who maybe wasn't operating in such good faith, there could possibly be a loophole. The way it's written now, it says if phase 1 does not include any residential development, then 50% of phase 1 and phase 2 shall be residential at the end of phase 2. But if phase 1 does include some residential development, i.e. 10 townhomes, then that condition would not apply. And you wouldn't have to have 50% residential at the end of phase 2. We were just looking at the numbers here, and as originally, the original proposal, before swapping out any uses, the original proposal that included 674 units, at the end of phase 2, it appears that it would be about 3/4 residential. We would suggest that this condition be reworded to simply say at the end of phase 2, 50%, at least 50% of the gross residential area must be residential, period.
Could you put that back up on the screen? That was the staff's language. That's not what the applicant submitted?
No, this is the applicant. No, this is the applicant's language.
So is this on, under item 1, section?
It's, if you look at your monitor,
Yeah, okay.
it's on the first page of the staff report.
Okay.
And basically, this is the language that the applicant suggested. But if you read it carefully, what it says is if there is any residential at all in phase 1, then the requirement for 50% residential at the end of phase 2 wouldn't kick in. So if you had your 10 townhome units, for example, that condition wouldn't kick in. So we're suggesting that you simply say there must be 50% residential at the end of phase 2, period, regardless of how much residential there is in phase 1.
That's okay, too. Charlie's
Okay.
reword is that. So that
Art, are you okay with that? Other commissioners, you okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay.
So that's one point. The second point is simply a clarification. In Ms. Pinkston's letter of today, where she says, add, if the Shellmound building is developed for primarily office use, the FDP shall include townhomes, et cetera, et cetera. We would like to know what primarily office use means. I mean, we think that needs to be quantified somehow or defined better.
what we meant was that the tower itself were office.
If the tower itself were entirely office, or
We're not housing.
Okay,
How about if we say, if the Shell Mound Tower
okay.
is not housing,
Sharon, if
Tower building, if the Shellman Tower building,
the Shellman Building Tower is not residential, how's that?
yes. Mine's getting a little messy, but that's the idea.
Okay, that's clear. Is that clear? Okay. Miru or Michael, anything else? Okay, I think that's all we have.
okay. Commissioners, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, points of clarification, or can we, do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve with the amendments.
A second.
Do we need to walk through these to make sure we know what we've got?
I think
here?
we should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Write them down.
Summarize this?
We don't want to come back a third time.
Right.
Have somebody shoot us for doing this.
That too.
Well,
It-
let me take a crack at it.
Okay. Start with the staff.
It would basically be, if you look at the staff report, it would be the condition Roman numeral 3A1D on page 1, with the clarification that at least 50% of the square footage of the project shall be residential at the end of Phase 2.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. None of this, okay. And then concerning the park, can you clarify what that is?
The park would basically be what Denise's letter adds on,
Okay.
which would make that the park would not be completed in Phase 1, but the process would begin in terms of design.
Okay.
So her letter of today, page 2, as she's written it, it's most of isn't in the staff report except for the should, and it changes the applicant shall from the applicant should.
And then the item D in the applicant's letter is moved up to item A, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's minor.
Yeah.
I would like an clarification. If you take applicant's letter, the first page, what does the commission want regarding owner-occupied?
I
Are
heard
we going to delete that?
Yes.
Chair
Okay.
Jeffrey say
Yes.
she wanted to
Can
delete
I-
it. I think the rest of the commissioners agreed.
We agree.
I wanted to
It's
ask the
not
staff a
feasible.
question.
Can
Okay.
we go through these first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
That's
sorry.
it?
I thought you.
And then other changes as indicated in the staff report where there is.
The other changes that Miru went through, the minor tweaks, and clarifications and corrections to the other conditions and resolutions and so forth.
Okay, and then the study for the bike path.
Right.
That- yeah,
And were you happy with the language that she had in her? Did you want to
Page
add
3.
something about?
No, Angela, are you okay with that language? I mean, Commissioner Branco had some questions, but I think,
I think we just wanted clarification that the study would happen in Phase 1.
Okay.
so maybe just,
Well, it says in the
It's
FDP
implied.
that includes the Shellmount building, and that
Right.
is Phase 1.
so are you okay with that, Angela, or do you want it specifically spelled out, Phase 1?
We can add Phase 1. We can say in the Phase 1 FDP that includes the Shellmount building.
That's fine, that makes it clear.
Okay, I think that's it.
Okay,
wanted to ask you a
Commissioner
question.
Hoff?
I'm not going to be able to support this project, but I wanted to ask you a question, just from my learning experience. Why did you change the requirement to 50% of residential gross square foot area rather than just saying they offered 600 units, when Phase 2 is done, they ought to have 600 units? Why go from requiring the number of units they promised us to gross square footage, which reduces the amount of units they will produce? What's the rationale for that?
Well, it doesn't necessarily. It depends what the market is. It may double the number of units if
How's
they're
that?
smaller.
If,
It's the
oh, I
size of the
see.
unit, you know, I mean,
Is that the idea, that
Yes.
it could be smaller
it's
units?
flexibility.
Or there could be a mix of studios and 3-bedroom
Okay.
units, something, whatever the market can accommodate, what
Thanks.
the demand is at that point.
And the
That's how I understood it.
674 was at the end of the total project, Phase 3. And we're only talking about Phase 2 here,
Well,
having a
will
50%.
they get there?
Probably not, with the changes to commercial.
That's my point, yeah, all right.
Okay, are we ready?
I think
Did we
we're-
have a motion and a second?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, who did that?
A motion by Commissioner Cardoza, a second by Commissioner Flores.
Okay.
Was it the other way?
No, no,
No, I think
No, that's what it was.
you made the motion.
40 versus 10.
So before we do the vote, can you read the very first one again about the residential units and the, because I know there was some question about Phase 1, if there aren't any built, or if there were some built, but I didn't hear that
Okay,
clarified.
let me try to cobble this together. The intent of the PDP is to achieve a vibrant mixed-use neighborhood. The final development plan may allow any use, including multifamily residential, and any use allowed on Table 1 above, provided, however, that if any allowed use other than the allowed use designated on the preliminary development plan, or any increase in the square footage or number of units is proposed in any building designated as residential in the preliminary development plan, the applicant shall submit a traffic study, and the city shall require appropriate compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act prior to approval. In any event, at the end of Phase 2, at least 50% of the square footage of the development, not including parking, in Phases 1 and 2 shall be residential.
Okay, so we've removed the reference to the Phase 1 development initially, where it said, because what we were looking at was the loophole that if any residences
Right.
were developed in Phase 1, then
Then they
Phase 2
basically don't
didn't
have to
apply.
do any more
Okay.
residential, essentially.
Okay,
So this would clarify that you got to have at least 50% residential at the end of Phase 2.
And then wouldn't you also add the language about townhomes, maximum townhomes at the Shellman building site? That
Right.
Oh,
comes out of our language.
okay.
So I think.
That's really important. I will not be happy if that isn't included.
So the add-on, sorry for the scribble, if the Shellman Tower building
Oh, yes.
is developed for primarily office, will include townhomes as depicted on the plans and maximize the number of these units, and then the quality of the office building.
was there did we want to say a minimum of X, or?
Well, there's 10 on the
There already
plan
is.
now.
There's 10 on the plans.
I suppose you could set a minimum, and a minimum of 10 and maximize
They
above
draw
that.
the plan, 16 may work better. so.
Right, but I'm saying, if the plan changes, the plan now shows 10, but it doesn't say here that the plan can't change. It just, it references the plan, it's depicted on the plan.
I think that's a good point, a
Why don't
minimum
we
of
say
10.
shall include a minimum of 10 townhomes above the retail in the location and maximize the unit count?
Yeah.
It's not very elegant, but.
Thank you, Denise. Ideally, the market will change so that we can get more townhomes.
Or bigger townhomes.
The market will change. It's just a matter of when.
Okay, do we know what we're voting on?
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Barranco,
Supporting, aye.
Commissioner Cardoza,
Aye.
Commissioner Flores,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff,
No,
and Chair Jeffrey.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 no. The motion is approved, and actually, now that I think about it, do we need to do separate motions on the EIR and all those findings?
Yes.
All right, well, I guess you just approved the project, but we haven't actually done the EIR findings yet. So we need to, should have done
So
those
there may-
first.
Well, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Well,
We're not,
oh, we
we
are.
can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I thought we were done with this item, or?
No, you need to do the EIR findings.
Oh, okay.
need to do what?
Oh, I thought you were joking. We don't have anything here in our packet. We didn't.
This is from your pack from last month?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we
Oh.
That's
Hope
right.
you remembered to bring that.
That's right, we pushed it to the
That's right, yeah.
They didn't put it in.
Yeah, it isn't in here.
Let me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We got so tied up in trying to hammer through these conditions that we sort of forgot about the staff report from last month. Right, okay, thank you, Miro. So if you have it in front of you, if you refer to your staff report from April 24th on this project, the first resolution is a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Emeryville reviewing and applying the Marketplace Redevelopment Environmental Impact Report to the Marketplace Redevelopment Project and making findings as required by the California Environmental Quality Act and recommending that the City Council adopt mitigation measures.
Fairly
So-
standard.
Excuse me?
Said fairly standard.
Yes.
I guess the question I have, with the changes that we've made to some of the conditions, does that affect the mitigation measures at all?
They will be incorporated by reference. That's what my
Okay.
staff report says.
Okay. Do we need to vote again on that first thing? On the one that we voted on, do we need to vote again on that? Okay. All right, so on the EIR resolution, do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Who took the second? Angela, okay. Moved by Commissioner Flores and seconded by Commissioner Branco. Commissioner Branco?
Aye.
Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Flores?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoff?
Aye.
And Chair Jeffrey.
Aye.
5 ayes, that motion is approved. And the other one was the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Emeryville recommending the City Council that the existing master use permit for Marketplace project be rescinded, a general plan amendment for floor area ratio be approved, and a planned unit development mixed-use designation be established for the Marketplace redevelopment area, and that a preliminary development plan be approved on a 15-acre site bounded by 64th Street to the north, Shellmound Way to the south, Amtrak Union Pacific Tracks to the east, and Christie Avenue to the west. You already voted on that. The vote was 4-1.
Thank you, Charlie.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes.
What? Gotta watch out, man. You'll be drummed out of the Corps.
Okay, we're all back. We reconvene now for the second item on the public hearings, the Pixar Animation Studios.
Economic Development and Housing Director Helen Bean will make the staff presentation, and then we have some people here from Pixar to address you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Planning Commissioners. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of a first amendment to the amended and restated development agreement related to the Pixar expansion project. Pixar Animation Studios is proposing to amend the amended and restated development agreement on a site. This is on a site of approximately 21 acres, bounded by 45th Street to the north, commercial and parking uses fronting San Pablo to the east, Park Avenue to the south, and Hollis Street to the west. And on the dias there are the preliminary development plans for the project, and I want to review that briefly in terms of the phasing of the project and what's been approved. The existing 218,900 square foot Pixar building was built as phase one of an original 1998 development agreement and participation agreement. And this development agreement was amended in May 2004 to include the current project, which totals approximately 533,000 square feet. This is the plan that shows phase two of that project. That consists of a new building here of up to 145,000 square feet at the corner of Park Avenue and Hollis, and it would increase the parking field to the east by 308 spaces, creating a total parking supply of 839 spaces. In this phase, there would be 2 public amenities, a 7.5-foot landscaped area along the Hollis Street frontage for public use, and a 40-foot wide linear park right here along the eastern border of the site. And that would be a pedestrian bicycle, class 1 bicycle and pedestrian path. So that's phase 2. That's L 1.0 in the packet. Okay, so then phase 3, right here. So that's the construction of a 180,250 square foot office building in the southeast corner of the site, fronting on Park Avenue, right here. And removal of, that would remove the surface parking and also construct a parking garage in this location, and that parking garage is approximately 1,800 spaces. So, and then phase 4 here shows the total build out of the entire development plan. And phase 3 and phase 4 can be changed, but phase 4 here is 207,300 square foot building at this corner. So that's all the phases of the plan. So what the proposed amendment would do is to extend the term of this development agreement by 5 years, so the expiration date would be extended from January 31st, 2023 to January 31st, 2028. It would extend the date for commencing the phase 2 improvements by 2 years. That would be from July 31st, 2008 to July 31st, 2010. It would eliminate the phase 3 delay fee and any other constraints upon the timing for the phase 3 improvements. And currently, the construction of phase 3 is required to commence February 1st, 2012. That's 7 years after the effective date of the agreement. And if phase 3 is not commenced by that time, Pixar would pay $1 million delay fee to the city. And after the payment of that fee, Pixar would have 10 years from the date of the agreement, so that would be by February 1st, 2015, to commence construction of phase 3. So the amendment is to remove that. Next is to reduce the capital improvement and services fee to a total of $500,000 payable in a single installment. And currently, there is a $1.5 million capital improvement and services fee payable in 3 installments. The first $500,000 installment has already been paid to the city. Next, it would remove the reference to the agency's repurchase right under the participation agreement. And currently, as a part of this process, the redevelopment agency's participation agreement would be amended to remove the ability of the agency to repurchase parcels located at the east end of the Pixar campus that were sold to Pixar pursuant to the 2004 participation agreement. And the agency currently has the right to repurchase these parcels if construction of phase 3 is not commenced by the time frame required in the development agreement. And lastly, a new requirement is added that Pixar would contribute $2 million towards the Emeryville Arts and Cultural Center and sponsor a fundraising event for the center. Pixar representatives have indicated, and they'll speak on this more after I finish, that the proposed amendments are necessary to proceed with the development of phase 2 of this development plan, and which is obviously an essential step to fulfilling the realization of the entire plan. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of these proposed amendments for the following reason. First, that it's consistent with and forwards the general plan goals, objectives, and policies, which are listed in your staff report. Citywide Goal 4, improve the quality and livability of the city by seeking development visually sympathetic to its surroundings and urban character. Citywide Goal 5, encourage land uses which strengthen the tax base while respecting the natural, scenic, and historic resources of the city. Economic Development Objective A, facilitate the transition of Emeryville into an intensely developed city with a wide range of economic activity, benefiting its central location in the Bay Area. Economic Development Objective B, strengthen the city's tax base by encouraging new economic activity with high tax generation potential. And Land Use Objective B, create a major activity in the Bay Area with new office, commercial, and high-tech industries and new housing of all types, replacing obsolete, incompatible, and low-intensity prior uses. Other benefits we see from the project are that it will enhance the urban form and urban design of the area. Phase 2 will add to the built environment at the portion of the campus nearest to the Park Avenue and Hollis Street corner, be located directly across Park Avenue from City Hall, and as such, the combined building massing of the two structures will frame Park Avenue and strengthen the identity of the Park Avenue district. We'll also implement the Park Avenue District Plan by facilitating the creation of the Cultural Arts Center in the district, improving district streets to provide a more friendly environment and unified, distinct district, and making Park Avenue a special civic and cultural street with special amenities for pedestrians and bicycles through causing construction of the Class 1 pedestrian and bicycle path at the eastern boundary of the site and improving the Hollis Street frontage. So in sum, we are recommending the Planning Commission adopt the proposed resolution, recommending that the City Council approve the First Amendment to the amended and restated development agreement. And now I'd like to ask Tom Carlisle from Pixar to come up and make a brief.
Can I ask you a question? The last item, the Pixar will hold a fundraising. Are we borrowing from Peter, paying Peter and borrowing from Paul? Because I thought their fundraisers are used to support the schools.
Well,
Is this in conflict, or are you suggesting
well,
they
the
could do
number
both?
of movies that Pixar will be making in the future is going to increase, and so
gonna increase?
we don't see that this will be in conflict with that.
Okay.
So now, Tom, if you want to come and.
Okay.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul is what I meant to say.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, commissioners, for agreeing to consider this tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Haven't been here in a while, and I remember the times when we used to pack the courtroom or the halls or whatever. So it's kind of nice to see that maybe we're not as controversial this time around.
Cartoons will do that.
Yes, cartoons are big, and things are going well with Pixar. So what I wanted to do is, Helen really gave, I thought, a very good synopsis of the proposed amendment changes. So all I wanted to do was just give you a little bit of the reasoning why, and some of the thinking behind it. Because in our minds, it's really very clear, and I hope it will be once I've told you why. Things have changed at Pixar over the last 2 years. That's why you haven't seen me up here in a couple years. And that is because Disney now owns Pixar. So our world has changed very much. Our universe is not the same as it used to be, and we're not in control of it any longer. But we have a very good relationship with Disney, and Disney really likes us. But at the same time, we have another power that we have to answer to. So some of you may know or may not know that over the last couple years, we've, as after Disney bought us, we kind of stopped our development because we've been trying to figure out, well, what should Pixar be? Should Pixar grow? Should we move to Burbank? And it took us a couple years of those discussions with Disney to figure out that it's really important that Pixar stay in Emeryville, and that we stay a part of this community, and that if we're going to stay here, that we would really like to grow on our campus and use up some of the square footage that's in our development agreement. And so those discussions led to Disney asking Pixar if we would increase our production output, and as a result, increase our employee headcount. And we said, sure, we would love to. But in the intervening couple years, I've been leasing real estate around Emeryville. because we've still been growing and we anticipate still growing. So we now have several leased buildings within a 5-minute walk of Pixar. The latest one being on 53rd Street, which is a little ways away now. It's farther than we would have liked. But it was always with the consideration in our minds that we would move people back to the main campus. One, because culturally, we need to be and want to be one unit back on our main campus. And two, we have some time constraints in our development agreement that we would lose our development rights if we didn't continue to build. So we explained that to Disney, and they said, okay, well, let us look at your development agreement a little bit closer. So they did. And what they came back with, they said, okay, we'll fund a new building for you on your campus, provided we can get rid of some of the terms of the development agreement that, from a business point of view, which is entirely how they look at it, doesn't sit right with them, because they look at things on a very, very long-term basis. They've been on their studio lot for over 75 years. So they want to make sure that they're looking out much farther than, you know, the 5, 10, 20 years that we're able to. And so what they realized, that the biggest thing that was the problem for them was the repurchase right of the PEA parcel, as you all call it. And because our parking is tied to that parcel. So if we build phase 2 and didn't build another building and the city bought back that PEA parcel, we wouldn't have a parking solution. So we met with staff several times, and we felt that we came up with a deal in terms that would be acceptable to staff and to the city, and that's why we're here, to propose these amendments. So if we can do this, then Pixar will proceed with phase 2. If we can't, then Disney's point of view is, we have rented buildings and we have good leases on those buildings. We can stay in Emeryville, but we just wouldn't be able to move people back to the campus. And from Disney's point of view, that's going to cost them a lot less money. So we're hoping we can convince the city that it's in everybody's best interest for Pixar to grow. Putting a building across the street on Park and Hollis strengthens the cohesiveness of this neighborhood, and it continues to strengthen the Park Avenue Cultural District. And we also feel that the $2 million that we would be giving to the city, especially if you look at it as a time value of money, is a generous donation towards the Art and Cultural Center. And we're thrilled to be able to do that. We think that that fits in with our philosophy of how we've contributed to the community in the past. We've done a lot for the schools, and we would like to continue, we will continue to do a lot for the schools. But this allows us to be part of the art community, which we always feel like we are, but this is a nice way for us to, you know, be able to do it in a recognizable fashion. So it was our idea to do the fundraiser art, and that same question came up about, are we going to compete with the EAF benefit, which we're having in 2 weeks, and we're talking about next year anyway. So we would still do an EAF benefit as well as this one, but what we agreed was that we would try to market the benefit broader than Emeryville, because we feel like arts are a community that is, you know, much bigger than just Emeryville. And if we use the Pixar employee base and staff as a resource and try to get them to send out invitations and market it, we're pretty sure we can fill the screening room. So that's our goal. So.
I have a question.
Okay, before we go to the public hearing, do any commissioners have questions for either Helen or for
I have a question for
the applicant?
So you're agreeable to these conditions?
Yes. Well, the conditions that, when you say these conditions,
The conditions
I'm not sure what
that
you mean.
These ones that are
The
before
amendments.
us?
The amendments,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, I used to be on the school board. In fact, I was the president of the school board, and I really appreciate everything Pixar has done for the schools because it's dear to my heart. I was a little disappointed that Pixar wasn't a little bit more friendly to the city hall. The southwest corner of the building many of us thought a wonderful little plaza could be built there, where our people could interact with your people at lunchtime, and you would still have security, and it would be a wonderful civic experience to have a public-private corner of your lot. But apparently, that's water over the dam. But I feel we missed an opportunity there. And just like Disney has needs, so do we. And one of our needs is to get the promenade project going as quickly as possible. So if we agree to this delay, could you expedite that pathway? Why couldn't you do
Yes.
that immediately?
Well,
As part, rather than waiting 2 more years, because we've been waiting for that a long time.
Sure.
And we'd like to go along with it, but I think that would be a very good
Okay.
gesture for you to expedite that pathway.
well, let me give you what I think will happen, and I think that will answer your question. If all goes well, we are working on the design of the building. And I got to tell you, this is going to be a beautiful building. It's going to be brick. It's going to have a lot of precedent of Emeryville warehouses. We went around and photographed all the really cool buildings, and which we've been doing for 10 years. Ever since we've been here, we've been photographing, because a lot of them are no longer here. And we're going to do a building in the style of what Emeryville was and should be, and or at least what we like about it. So if this happens and the city council approves this, I mean, we're going to keep going on design over the next few months. But we think we'll be back for our final development plan by September, October, with the expectation that we would break ground in March or April of next year. At that point, we'll start the linear park. And the reason I couldn't do it earlier is because we have to move dirt from our current property over to that property to bring the grade up, and it's complicated to try to just work on a tiny little strip without affecting what's next to it. But I think I could say that if all goes well, within the year, we would be starting on that, less than a year.
Thank you.
I saw in the amendments references to the dedication of the land for the bike path, the linear park. Has that occurred yet, or what?
Yes, it
what
has.
is that? So that
Yes,
land
we dedicated it to the city, but the city hasn't actually accepted it until, by reason, until we actually do the work.
They've got to move the utilities, for one thing.
Okay, so
From the
the
street to the-
initial $500,000 capital improvements payment has been made, and
Yes,
the
it
land
has.
for the bikeway
Yes.
has been offered in dedication already. Is that's
Okay.
correct?
I have a question. Are you done?
No, go ahead.
And this is for staff. Charlie, the capital improvements and services fee payment, we understand now that $500,000 was paid, and that's gone for the acquisition of, or the dedication of the bikeway. Was that the remaining $1 million targeted for some type of improvements that were capital improvements, just infrastructure kinds of improvements? What was that money targeted for?
I'm not sure. I believe it was just targeted to unfunded projects in the capital improvement program.
Okay, so by reallocating that money to the Arts and Cultural Center, we're not taking money away from some other necessary improvements that need to be
Not
made,
that I'm aware of.
And
at least as far as it were targeted.
I don't
that is
believe so.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
So I have a question that kind of builds on what Art was asking, which is the design of the Pixar grounds is really beautiful, but it's completely inaccessible, and actually you can't even see the building when you're driving up Park Boulevard. I mean, the Pixar Animation Studios sign is really fabulous, but that's kind of all you can see all around the whole property. So do you envision with increasing the buildings and having them closer to the edge of the properties that they would actually be viewable? And
Yes.
could people actually walk through any parts of the actual Pixar space other than the dedicated
No.
strip?
Yes and no. Yes to your first part, which is the building on the corner of Park and Hollis is going to be taller, 3 stories, and so it will be significantly bigger and more visible. But other than the linear park or the setback on Hollis Street where we are putting benches for city employees or anybody, we don't anticipate making other changes to open up the park in any other way.
Do you have security issues that?
Yes, we do. Very big security issues. We're a 24-hour company, and we've had many, many instances of people trying to either not only break into our property, but demonstrate out in the front, or just wanting to see a movie star. Yeah.
A cartoon star?
Well, no, our voice stars are.
So, Charlie, let me ask you, what level of design review will we have on this proposed building?
Full?
Oh, you'll have full-blown design review as part of a final development plan. I mean, the final development plan will come before you, and you will critique it just as you would under design review for any project.
I'm sorry, you said we will have design review of the building?
Well, it's not called design review, but that's what it is when you review the final development plan, yes.
This will go to council?
Yes. Now I should say that you have limited discretion in this final development plan. And you can weigh in on the aesthetics and so forth, but the primary thing you're looking at is whether it substantially conforms to the preliminary development plan that was already approved. So you can tweak the design within limits, but you couldn't change the overall parameters of the building that were already approved under the PDP.
We can't get our plaza across from City Hall, huh?
That would require an amendment to the PDP.
I think you'll like it.
Does anyone else have questions for the applicant or for staff?
I think the applicant should try to put a plaza in the building.
Thank you.
Thank
Did you
you.
have another question, Angela?
I did have one more question. I wanted to ask, Mr. Carlisle, I actually had one more question for you. This is concerning the parking garage and the number of spaces. Do you plan to institute any programs to cut down on traffic impact and environmental impacts, like ride sharing or
We have a
transit?
really great program,
Okay.
and we do all that. We have van sharing that picks our sponsors, and outlets for electric cars. We try to make biking to work as easy as possible. We give coupons to people who have needs to get home when their car's broken or whatever. Well, what are the coupons for? I'm trying to remember. But we do have a whole program, and I'm happy to have somebody in our company share that with you, or the whole commission, if you'd like to see it.
Yeah. I was just curious about what percentage of your staff here actually drive to work in single occupant vehicles?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that. But we have a lot of bikers, and we do have a lot of ride shares. I don't know if it's, I don't know what the percentages are, but I could find out for you.
Okay.
I think some of that information was in the CEQA document, and I don't remember.
Well,
been
it's
so
only
long
better
ago.
than what it
Yeah.
was then.
Yeah.
And really, if make it, just tell me and I'll make it happen, that we'll get it to all of you. It's something we would want to share. So, yeah.
So how many employees do you have off your campus now in the leased buildings?
We have about 240, I think.
And what would you anticipate with the new building?
It would be 300 to 350.
Additional?
Well, that would be, we would be moving a lot of those people from those leased buildings to that building. So it'd be a little bit bigger than, although probably by the time we build it, it will be
And
full.
how many do you have in your main building now?
We have about 630.
So you'd be approaching 1,000.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and then some. We wouldn't necessarily give up all of our lease space, Ron.
Okay. All right. So are there any other questions of the applicant or staff? Then I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Come forward. You have 3 minutes to express your opinions. And if you
Ron
could sign in
Silverman.
when you're through.
I'll sign in a
Yeah.
moment. I just wanted to get an understanding of the phasing. I didn't quite follow all the phases of the phasing of the parking garage or parking lot, and I kind of wanted to get an idea on the existing parking ratios and I remember, I believe there was some tandem parking, so I just want to, maybe you can bring me forward on that so I can understand that, because it was a little fuzzy to me, if you know.
Well, I'm not sure I know.
Can you, excuse me, can you address the commission, please?
I thought I was clear, but I wanted to kind of get an idea of what the existing parking ratios are, or how much parking will be phased in as the second building is completed, and also when the parking garage gets phased in. So I'm just not clear how many spaces there are and what the ratios are. And
Okay, can you,
To the best of my knowledge, I can
Ron, could you sign in, please?
I can answer what I know, and that is with Phase 2, we will be have enough parking for about 839 parking spots. I don't know what the ratio is from compact to full size.
And what do you have now?
Well, I heard Ron ask about some ratios. I wasn't sure exactly what he was talking about, so I don't know if that's what he means. I don't know what the ratio is. And the parking garage would be required of Pixar to be constructed upon construction of Phase 3, because at that point, we would need it. So.
And that contains how many spaces?
Up to 1,800.
1,800?
Yeah.
Well, from the staff's point of view, do they meet the parking requirements?
We do.
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
don't-
well,
That
then
was
that's the
all
answer.
hammered out in the PDP.
So their parking requirements are met by those numbers?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Or you were? Ron, could you introduce yourself on the mic so that you can, you didn't introduce yourself when you spoke.
Ron Silverman. Ron Silverman from Fordham Properties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no one else, we'll bring it back to the council.
The commission?
The commission, excuse me.
Public hearing is
Slip of the
closed.
Slip of the, yeah. I'll close the public hearing and we'll bring it back to the commission.
Who wants to go first?
I don't really have any comments. I've heard nothing but positive things leading up to the meeting tonight. Supportive, except for some of Jim's comments, which will be read.
Well, we weren't planning on reading them, but you have them in front of you.
Yeah. I thought for the edification of the viewers at home. They're valid points. But after hearing the presentation tonight and knowing Pixar's stature and how, Emeryville is sometimes, my mother in Cape Cod thinks that the Incredibles live here. And, with all the overwhelming support and hearing that the phases are coming up and that they're going to be beautiful buildings, I just don't see any reason why I wouldn't support this entirely.
So, the only real concern that I had, looking at the proposed amendments was just the elimination of the delay fee and the fact that we would no longer have a commitment for, any improvements that would go along with what was being proposed by that for, construction of Phase 3.
I don't understand.
So in the second, it says, elimination of this is on the project description, page 5. And it says, under the proposed amendments to the agreement, the very bottom of the page, it says elimination of delay fee, and Pixar has no obligation to proceed with construction of the Phase 3 improvements, which may proceed anytime after the Phase 2 improvements are completed until the expiration of the development agreement. So it sounds like that would go away completely, and there would also be no, what's the word, disincentive for not actually moving forward with the project. So that would be a concern, I think.
I think you mean there'd be no incentive to move forward with the project if the delay fee was removed. So
or disincentive to not move forward. I mean, because that was the point of the delay fee, to provide some benefit to the city if the project did not start. And then if the fees for capital improvements, the $500,000 installments, were not targeted for any specific projects at this point, then I would be okay with, waiving that or no longer requiring that part, because they are then making a bigger contribution for the Arts and Cultural Center. So that's a very positive offset.
Any other comments?
I don't have any comments. I'd move approval of the matter.
I'd second that.
I have a couple of comments.
Sorry.
You're really trying to cut me off tonight there, Commissioner Cardoza. I know. I'm going to keep it brief here. First of all, I just want to make a comment and follow up on something that Tom said. I think some of us were here about 3 or 4 years ago, so it's been a while. And I really want to echo what Commissioner Hoff said about Pixar's commitment to the community. And since we were all here 3 or 4 years ago, they were fairly new to the community, and they've really stepped up to the plate to offer this community so much in the way of fundraising, employees that mentor students at our schools, that serve on boards such as ECAP. And so they've really, really outreached to this community. And I just want to commend the organization for doing that. I think it's you're a wonderful neighbor. And then I also feel very good, Tom, that you mentioned that you would like to get going with the bike lane and the linear park sooner rather than later. I think that's important, and that was an amenity that many in the community were looking forward to, so that'll be great to get that going. I'm okay with the idea of moving the remaining $1 million of capital improvement and services fee over to support the Arts and Cultural Center. Since it's not targeted for anything, I think this is a good use to target it for. I do, however, have some concerns about the elimination of the agency's repurchase right. And I understand what Pixar's concerns are about that, but I don't see any leverage for the city if we eliminate that option. And we want to see Pixar build out as quickly as possible, but conditions can change. And if we don't have, as a city, an opportunity to acquire that property back for another use to support the promenade, I'm very concerned about that. And I would like to see that remain in the development agreement, that the elimination of, the elimination of the agency's repurchase right be stricken from the revised language.
But if they put in this parkway within the first phase of new development, that would eliminate that anyway, wouldn't it? Because the city wouldn't want to repurchase the improvement.
No, but that's already a commitment that's been made. That would be an amenity that could be incorporated into some other development that might take place there if that were to occur. So it's just a concern that I have, and unless staff can convince me otherwise, I'm real hesitant about supporting the amendments completely as proposed and recommended by staff.
I would agree with Commissioner Jeffrey that this is the only leverage that the city has to keep that eastern side from remaining a sea of parking until 2028. And certainly if a phase 3 was not going to develop, and that's where you're meeting your parking requirements, if the agency were repurchasing the property, that would give some capital to provide an alternative parking on another part of the property. And I just hate to see the city signing off on the one major tool that it has to encourage the development of that area from surface parking. We're really trying very hard to get away from seas of surface parking in the city.
Well, it would be fenced and enclosed according to their plan. as the current surface parking is, so it wouldn't be visible. But I do agree that it would, if they don't develop it, it would be nice to have it for townhouses or the use that it was originally intended for. So I don't know if there's some way that
Yeah, and I don't-
repurchase could be held in there.
I mean, I understand the whole staging issue, you know, but staff, help us out here a little bit. It's just a concern that as you see here, that several of us have, and I
Yeah.
believe Commissioner Martin had that same concern.
Well, as the representative from Pixar explained, I mean, the main issue that Disney had with the existing development agreement, participation agreement, was the repurchase right, because they want to secure their interests in the site, and they really need the removal of that right to fund the development of Phase 2.
You know, as Commissioner Cardoza said, once we get the greenway in, if you got this back, what would you have? You'd have a little strip of undevelopable land. We wouldn't own the property on either side of it.
Well, will we own the street? Is
Yeah.
that part of the?
The only thing we have to repurchase for is this street right away, isn't it?
No, in parcel 2.
No, I
Is it-
can show you the.
Is it the whole
Parcels 2
parcel?
and
It's
3?
about, yeah, it's
That's
almost 3 acres.
Parcel.
It's almost 3 acres.
Oh, we have a repurchase right for the entire?
It's on the first page of the ledger size plans you have, shows you the parcel maps, the parcels and the as you can see the right-of-way to the street, to Emery Street there, and Pixar parcel 2, 2.24 acres. Those two pieces would be that's what the repurchase right
Oh, it's a
is-
repurchase for both of them?
relates to.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Sorry.
That's all that.
Basically, I think it's all that area out there that is currently a vacant lot.
Right.
Had that parcel been approved for townhouses or zoned for townhouses? Prior to Pixar's
me look.
acquiring it?
There was a townhouse project that I believe was approved, obviously never built. The approvals have long since expired.
I mean, if we approve this as recommended by staff, we would not have an opportunity to go back, let's say, in 10 years, you know, if the conditions change and things are slowing down. I mean, I just want to have an opportunity for staff to revisit this if it's looking like we're just going to have a vacant lot there for 20-odd years. And I know Pixar, you know, you cannot guarantee because you have a lot of challenges, but
Well, the site would be developed as a surface parking lot as part of Phase 2. When Phase 2 is built, the vacant lot will become surface parking.
That vacant lot becomes parking in Phase 2?
That's correct. Here, I'll show you
And they
the,
need that parking.
so it would be
for their-
completely built out
They need that parking for their new building, is that the
in that
idea?
phase.
It's,
So we'd have to take back a parking lot.
Phase 2, and this is the parking lot, and there's the bicycle path.
what the
This is currently vacant, developed.
Right.
What the possible trade-off is some of the land for a parking structure to cover the parking that would be
Right.
taken up.
Yeah, I understand
But it would be
that.
developed as a
So it would be
surface
fenced
parking.
and landscape, and
I don't see the
wouldn't be a
problem, they'll
vacant
be
lot.
using it as a parking lot rather than a vacant lot.
So maybe it wasn't clear, but maybe it's more clear now that this is the heart of this matter, is that we need that parking. And we can't build Phase 2 unless we can have the parking. And we can't build Phase 2 unless we can secure the rights of that parking in the future. So
I understand. It's clear
I just
for
wanted
me
to make
now,
it really
yeah.
clear that there won't be a Phase 3 if there isn't a Phase 2.
Phase 2.
But I've been at Pixar 12 years, and I know I can't promise anything.
Uh-huh.
But we have grown from the 400 people to almost 1,000, and we will continue to grow at least over the next few years. I don't know if there'll be a Phase 3, but it's very likely that there would be. So, you know, I hope that the city has enough faith in us to want us to continue, at least with Phase 2, because otherwise we won't be able to grow at all.
There is a deadline for commencing Phase 2 in the agreement.
2
So that's
years.
changed to July 31st, 2010. So that's in the agreement. So you have it, so that's there.
So that if phase 2 doesn't proceed by that date, we still wouldn't have the right to go back and acquire that property.
No, but then the development agreement will expire because they would be in violation of the term.
So it would have to be
Then what
renegotiated
happens?
again.
Revert back to the right to reacquire the property or not?
No,
No.
No.
no, it wouldn't, because
No.
that would be eliminated.
If the city ultimately approves this proposed amendment to the development agreement, the repurchase right will go away. But what Helen is saying is that there's still the provision in there that says phase 2 needs to be built by 2010. And if it isn't, then the
His
whole
question
development
is,
agreement
suppose
goes
it
away.
isn't.
Excuse me?
Suppose they don't do phase 2
Then
is
the
the
development
question.
agreement expires.
But
And
we don't
then
have
what
the right
happens?
to reacquire the property.
Not if it's amended as proposed. That's right. No.
So
Yeah.
so if they did not proceed with that phase, what is the consequence and what options does the city have?
I'm not sure. What is
If
this?
they don't proceed with
If
phase 2.
they don't do phase 2.
Right, that means the development agreement expires.
Right, but so what?
Which means,
And then what happens?
leverage do we have after
Why,
that?
why,
They
why
don't, they
can't,
lose any of
Why
their
can't we-
entitlements to build anything.
why can't
in
we
the
say,
future.
but if they haven't,
they said they won't do phase 2, they said they won't do phase 2 unless they have the right to that property. Why can't we say that we will agree to this amendment and it will become effective when they submit their application to phase 2? Then they have it concurrently with the phase 2 approval.
I might need Tom's help for that, but I think I can answer the prior question and maybe that one as well. I'm Anna Shimko. I'm a lawyer that helps Pixar out on these land use issues. As to that particular issue, I think, first of all, Pixar and Disney need the assurance of this development agreement amendment in order to spend what's an inordinate amount of money between now and the beginning of phase 2, and know that they can move forward with the repurchase right gone. I don't think you need that because it's all tied together anyway. Your question had earlier been, what happens if we don't proceed with phase 2? First of all, if Pixar doesn't proceed with phase 2, Pixar will not take title to some very critical pieces of property. The Emery Street right-of-way is currently between the outside, the fence line that is the end of the parking lot and the property that Pixar owns, the PEA parcel. So until we start phase 2, Pixar doesn't get title to that land. So there would be a hole in Pixar's land, which obviously is not something that it would ever want to have happen. There also is a spur parcel over at the Hollis property that would not go to Pixar if phase 2 did not proceed. If phase 2 did not proceed, then, as was mentioned, the development agreement would terminate, the participation agreement would terminate. The city and the redevelopment agency would then have all of its zoning and redevelopment agency powers and could change the zoning and the redevelopment plan as it so chose as to the rest of Pixar's land, and indeed, not that I would encourage this, obviously, on Pixar's behalf, but the redevelopment agency would have its authority to make its new plans happen if it wanted to do that.
But you didn't answer my question. Suppose we say, okay, we'll amend the repurchase agreement with the proviso that if they don't do phase 2, it reinstates itself. They're not hurt any, and we haven't lost our powers.
The thing is, if we don't do phase 2, the development agreement goes away, and
But we can't buy the property back. That's the concern of the commissioners.
but Pixar is committed to do phase 2, and
They're
is
not committed to
interested.
do phase 2.
Well, they
Are
are.
they?
I mean, they already have many
Verbally
consultants
they are.
engaged and have moved forward and
Oh,
are
wow.
planning on bringing back a plan this fall for you all to look at and hopefully approve.
But they're not obligated to do it, is the problem that the commission has. They're not obligated to do phase 2, are they?
Well,
I'm
they are to
not
the
worried
extent
about
that
phase 2. I think
No.
Pixar would like to go forward with phase 2
Well,
and
then I
will
don't
go
think-
forward with
then I
phase
don't
2.
think
I'm
we
worried
have a-
about what
then
happens.
Then I can't see where we have a problem if they're obligated to do 2. Go ahead.
Well, we're obligated, go ahead.
The development agreement includes an obligation to do phase 2.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, no,
And
my concern is the surface parking remaining for the next 30 years, which I don't you know,
I
You
wanna
won't
see.
see it
my
because
motion.
it's fenced any more than you see it now.
I reaffirm my motion.
Okay.
Any other?
I don't have any more questions.
Any other discussion? Okay, so Commissioner Hoff made a motion.
And Commissioner Cardoza seconded. It was on the staff recommendation. Ready to vote?
Okay.
All right.
Without exception.
I don't think so.
Nope, not so fast.
Commissioner Branco?
Are you going to vote against it?
So I actually didn't have as much of a problem with that particular purchase, the city's option to purchase, as with the other condition or the other amendment proposal, which was elimination of the delay fee. Because it seems like that actually would benefit the city if there were any delays for some reason. So I would support without that particular amendment, the
Well,
phase
we're
3
voting on the
delay fee.
motion that's on the floor.
Yeah.
The motion on the floor is the staff recommendation unless you want to make a substitute motion.
Then I would like to make a substitute motion.
What's the substitute motion?
To go with the staff recommendation with the exception that we would not eliminate the delay fee for phase 3.
Phase 3 or phase 2?
3, there's no delay fee.
It's
What,
actually phase
That's the $1
3.
million?
And, no, that's different. This is on page 5. Is it page 5?
The capital
Yeah.
improvement services fee?
Right.
Both of them?
Just
No,
this
no,
one?
for the improvements that
Yeah,
go
but
along with
that's
phase
2
3.
times
They have no
$500, that's
obligation to
$1
do
million.
those improvements.
Million and a half.
Well, they
And
already
we-
paid
there would-
500.
And if there were any delays, we would not
Alright.
have any benefit for
I just
For the having
maybe
those
make one.
delays.
We are giving you that delay fee now. That is what the $2 million is. It is in effect.
It's just shifted over
It's
to
in
another
lieu of the
use.
delay fee.
So I thought that there's a capital improvement services fee.
Right?
And I thought that was what is being moved to the Arts and Cultural Center.
Well,
For
that's.
both of them.
Right, they both are. There's two $500,000
Right?
fees plus the $1 million delay fee. That's the $2 million.
We're not losing it, we're just shifting it.
Shifting
And,
the.
and you're getting it now.
Okay.
So it's worth more than $2 million.
And,
So- and then
and
the
the half a
capital
million has
improvement-
already
And,
been
and
that,
can I just say one thing? There's
yeah.
no obligation for us to build phase 4. So that second $500,000 was never guaranteed.
So then I guess that I wasn't looking at phase 4, but construction of phase 3. And so based on the language here, it says that the elimination of the delay fee and there would be no obligation to proceed with construction of phase 3 improvements. So that is what I'm looking at.
But we're getting the money anyway.
So that,
Right now, instead of 15 years later when they don't do it.
Or if we do it. No, when
so
we
that-
do it.
that is the other $1 million
Yes.
that we're looking at that's now going to the Arts and Cultural Center. So we wouldn't be losing anything except for whatever improvements would be required with construction of phase 3. Am I asking that correctly?
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to explain it. Well, there's a delay fee if they don't build phase 3 of $1 million. And then there are 2 installments of $500,000 each, one at phase 3 and one at phase 4 for capital improvement funding.
Okay.
All of those would go away, but in lieu of that, we would get $2 million now, which is what those numbers add up to, for the Cultural Arts Center.
Okay.
So
And
when,
so-
And
so
actually, the
Angela,
way
when
the
we build
development
phase
agree-
3, we don't have to pay 500,000.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
The way the agreement is written now, if they build phase 3, but they never build phase 4, they would not have to pay the $1 million delay fee for phase 3. They would not have to pay the $500,000 capital improvement fee for phase 4. They would have to pay the $500,000 capital improvement fee for phase 3. So we would be getting $500,000, period. Whereas this way, we're getting $2 million.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So we're coming out way ahead.
So, do you want
So I withdraw my
Substitute?
your
substitute.
substitute motion? Okay,
motion.
so then,
Okay.
then we have the motion on the floor. If there's no other substitute motions?
All right, shall we start again?
We could.
Yes.
We're voting on the staff recommendation, which was moved by Commissioner Hoff and seconded by Commissioner Cardoza. Commissioner Barranco.
Aye.
Commissioner Cardoza.
Aye.
Commissioner Flores.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoff.
Yes.
Commissioner Jeffrey.
Aye.
Chair Donaldson. Vice Chair Donaldson.
Aye.
6 ayes, the motion is approved, and we will forward your recommendation to the City Council.
Okay.
Send us
Thank
a-
you very much.
Send us a ticket to your,
Congratulations.
send me a
That-
ticket to your next showing.
Okay,
Brown egg.
that ends the public hearings on the agenda. We have one more item on the agenda, which is commissioner comments.
I don't
I
have
have a
any.
comment.
Oh, you do?
Okay.
Hurry up.
You're taking up since Chair Martin's not
I
here.
have a request and a comment.
Excuse me, can we have quiet in the chamber, please?
I have a question for the staff. I want to make sure they're listening before I...
Okay, could we
Staff
have the
is listening.
conversations outside, please? Thank you.
I've heard a lot of comments about the transit center being a transit center, which to me indicates there are people coming to and from Emeryville that use that facility. I've also heard many comments that it's nothing more than a parking lot for the Amtrak station, which means that we're going to be building a parking lot to serve residents of the Greater Bay Area, utilizing our parking lot so they can use the Transcontinental Railroad. I've asked several times, and I never know if there was an answer. Is it possible to see or to have an origin-destination study done of the people who use the Amtrak station, which I think will be very important to us when and if this project comes before the Planning Commission? I'd like to know who uses the station, where they come from, and where they go. I almost went down there one Sunday afternoon and started interviewing people. But I thought maybe it could be done.
Retirement.
I don't know if there is one, but if there isn't one, I would request that something like that be done, because I think it could be very useful.
I believe that Amtrak or the Capital Corridor have studies like that. We can certainly.
Could you see if you could get
We
it?
can certainly look into it.
Just as a follow-up, Art, I believe at one of the study sessions, didn't we ask for something like that, Gail?
I know we discussed it.
Yeah.
We've discussed it before.
And I
and
never remember getting a
I
clear
think I've
answer.
asked for it as well, because it's my perception that 99% of the folks using that Amtrak station are going to San Francisco or coming from San Francisco.
Right,
So
that's my concern.
Well, I think less so on the Capital Corridor trains.
that's what we're trying to find out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We can bring it back to you next time the transit center is before you.
Thank you.
that'd be good.
That would be great. Any other commissioner comments?
What's the, Charlie, a lot of buildings, I've heard also that a lot of buildings that are for sale, condos, are being converted to apartments, or they're about to be. We see all these auctions that are happening. I know all over Oakland. I haven't heard too many auctions happening here in Emeryville or any. But I have heard some rumors of a couple of larger condo buildings that might convert to rental. Do they have to come in and have that approved by staff or commission or anything?
The only thing that they need to get approved that I'm aware of is amendment to their affordable housing agreement from the city council.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that the requirements for rental are different than the requirements for condo. So if they have an affordable housing agreement with the city that is about condominiums, and then they decide that it's going to be a rental project, they need to get their agreement amended to reflect the rental status. 1401 Park had to do that.
Yeah, I remember that.
Other than that, it doesn't come back to the commission for any kind of reapproval or modification.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other comments and no one wants to watch an hour-and-a-half webcast, then I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:48.
Right.